saying that all construction is bad, because it's not. The majority of construction, the majority of developers in Nova Scotia provide good, sound work that provide long-lasting housing for the people who purchase them. Mr. Speaker, in Bedford and in the Bedford-Birch Cove area, there is a strong growth of condo units. We have a large growth in the number of retirees in this province, and if you look at the numbers within the province and the average age, it's growing. And those individuals are moving from the single-family homes into the condominium type of environment. And Mr. Speaker, in my constituency, one of the strongest growth areas has been the development of the condominium corporations and the actually explosive development, really, if you want to say. During the election, Mr. Speaker, in 2006, as I was going through and doing my door-to-door, I ran across an individual, Ray Hunt. And Ray lived in my area, and Ray, along with his group of individuals, brought forward some of the concerns that they had. Now, Mr. Speaker, just to clarify an issue here, there was a comment made by one of the members of the House here that the Minister of Municipal Services, or the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, wasn't really available during those times for individuals. Mr. Speaker, Ray Hunt and a group of individuals met with the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations within, I think, probably the first 6 months of this government taking office. From that meeting, Mr. Speaker, the formation of the Condominium Owners Association of Nova Scotia took place. Ray brought together along with, I may as well at this point in time also thank Councillor Debbie Hum, and also former councillor, past deceased Gary Martin, who both Gary and Debbie were just instrumental in bringing these groups together. And from that meeting, Lauren Verbioff, who was also a former resident of my community, along with Ray Hunt, who was the vice president, they formed the CONS group. Condominium Owners Association of Nova Scotia is critical and is critical in the process to bring their issues forward, Mr. Speaker. In my area, Mr. Speaker, there have been problems not only with water, we've had structural problems. One of the structural problems that we had in the area was actually about a $1.6 million structural problem. It wasn't a small one. And that issue alone brought the need for some type of government intervention to deal with the issues of construction. Some of the meetings, Mr. Speaker, that I attended, Ray Hunt actually brought forward a piece of pipe, just a piece of water pipe from the hot water heating system. And in that pipe, it looked like a porcupine. There were nail holes from air guns all the way along the water pipe. That water pipe held the water for probably 18 months. Then all of a sudden it broke. The water flooded, did a lot of water damage. So it's not only water damage from windows, it's water damage that occurs from construction that hasn't, I don't want to use the word been improperly inspected, but hasn't been inspected close enough, really. So there are a lot of issues here, and these, you know, the owners of the condominiums right now should be able to go into these buildings with the full knowledge that there is some protection for them. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, this particular first step that's been brought forward by the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations is in that vein. One of the issues, of course, is warranty. I guess in my experience, one of the problems with condo construction in the HRM area, and that's what I can speak of, and in my area, is that many of them are built by companies holding numbered companies. Those numbered companies last a year, and once the numbered company is gone, Mr. Speaker, there is no recourse. So our government, I know right now, and I know through the Minister of Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, is looking at that issue. That is a very, very significant issue, and it's been brought up by most speakers. There is a need for some type of warranty that protects the buyers of the condos in anywhere in Nova Scotia for a period of time. Now, I know that it's been suggested 5 to 7 years. I don't know what the number is. There is no magic number to this, and that's something that will come along as we go through this process. Mr. Speaker, there's also the issue of registration of developers, registration of trades. Another one is that really is a significant one for me personally, is the whole issue of sign-off. And who can sign off on the structural integrity of a 20 and 30-story condominium? In many cases right now, Mr. Speaker, from what I understand, and no disrespect, because I mean architects provide an incredibly important part in the development of these buildings, but is an architect a structural engineer? No. So, Mr. Speaker, I think as we go through these issues, you're going to see that issue of sign-off is going to be a critical one for our government as we try to deal with some of the outstanding issues with regard to the condominium development. Now, Mr. Speaker, if I may say so, just at this point in time too, there was another comment made that, well, the single-family home isn't really that important, and you really don't have that many that have issues. Mr. Speaker, I disagree. I mean, I've been involved in municipal government for a long time, probably as much or more than most people in this House. And over my 15 years there, Mr. Speaker, I have seen houses that have had to be dismantled, actually taken down because of structural failure. I've seen other houses, single-family homes, usually to do with the foundations, that have been plagued from day one, and 10 years later they are still plagued with the foundations either cracking, failing, dropping. Mr. Speaker, this bill, and I'm so glad to see the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, acknowledging the fact that it's got to deal with all residences. Just, in my area, without question, the largest focus is condominiums, because that is, at this point in time, is really the largest supplier of freehold residences that we have. And in my area, Mr. Speaker, it's not just a case of a few hundred that have been built, it's a case of several thousand that have been built. And still many are under construction. There's also the issue of inspections, Mr. Speaker. And what should happen during the construction phase, who should be doing the inspections. And I think that really is going to be a critical question that we've got to answer as the next phases of the bills come forward. Dispute resolution is also one that is, as was brought forward today, a very, very difficult one, especially when you're living next door to your neighbor and several other neighbors, and you may be the odd person out in an issue. And it makes it very difficult for people who live in this type of condominium environment to actually bring forward something that may be really bothering them and that may be totally in violation of the Condominium Corporation Act under which they live. So that is something I know that we've been talking about, and I know that the Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations is on top of that, and we are discussing that particular issue. And I know that hopefully in the spring, as the new legislation is brought forward, that the amendments will be brought forward to deal with that. Mr. Speaker, I know that everybody's, we've had a lot of speakers on this issue, but I think it's not an issue. It is not something that is going to be resolved, we'll say, by HRM. I know that Halifax Regional Municipality is inherited the majority of condos in this province. And I can tell you that either through the Planning Act or through the contract development agreement process, they're handicapped from the standpoint of not being able to address the issues that are being brought forward here. I know that they do their best with the tools that they have available, Mr. Speaker. But this is something that is going to need the cooperation of Halifax Regional Municipality and ourselves, the development community, the trades. We can go right on down the list, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, before I take my seat, I again want to thank the members of CONS, in particular Ray Hunt, who I believe Ray was probably the spearhead in bringing this issue forward, at least to me, and I know to the Minister as well. And he's been an incredible gentleman to deal with. Lauren Verbioff, who's been just great. He's the new president of the Condominium Corporation. And also, Mr. Speaker, again, I want to mention Councillor Debbie Hum from District 16, who has been she's always been there for the condominium group and myself, and for those people that she represents, and again, Gary Martin, who we all miss very much. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I will take my seat, and I look forward to this bill as it moves forward through the law amendments process. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Handsworth. Hanseas, pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'll only have a few comments. Really interested in the comments made by members and by the minister who moved second reading. I want to say the member for Halifax Clayton Park talked about the growth in her area at one time being one of the fastest growing areas east of Quebec. Well, I think it's a toss-up now between Hants East and the constituency of my colleague from Timberley Prospect. Although in 10 years of doing this work, I've had very few calls on complaints around the condo development, and I actually think the amount of it in East Hants is minimal to none. But I have to say that the section in the bill that when it tries to define residential unit would tend to lead me to think of a freehold residential property as a house, and so I find that I'll give credit to the minister if that's what that actually means. By and large, I would see this bill not to accomplish much in that regard, only insofar as I think most people would use lawyers and trust account for their deposit, and this bill basically is doing that. I want to say that what I do see is some issues, and other members have raised it, and that's around the issue of the warranty, so that you have protection for a longer period of time. I think you can get a better warranty on a refrigerator in this country than you do on a house, and I would say that when you look at the cost of a refrigerator compared to that of a house, common sense would tell you you're probably getting shortchanged on the warranty side on the home. But I think some things that the minister might want to think about that would be helpful in this regard, and I think most members have indicated, it's the issue of the quality side and the construction that really is the concern, which is not really addressed in this piece of legislation. But recently, the Department of Agriculture has a website now that you can inspect or have a look at the restaurants and see how they're being appraised by the department, and maybe that's what we should have in terms of construction companies or whatever, that we can get a feel for what the public's view of particular contractors are, and when choosing who may build. I can't say that I oppose the notion of licensing. I mean, we certainly want qualified people who are electricians, plumbers, etc. But I want to say that doesn't necessarily guarantee perfection. The gentleman who did the plumbing in my house wasn't a trained plumber, and after 20-some years, we've never had a problem. And I also think about, and maybe this is my rural Nova Scotia bent, but when I think about people in my constituency, at least some years ago, who would build their own houses, or if a couple was going to be married, the father-in-law and the father of the groom, they'd all get together, they'd build a house, and maybe none of them had any papers for anything. They'd probably hire an electrician, and they may hire a plumber, or not, but certainly they could build a house and it wouldn't leak, and it would be a good job. And one of the things that they could do is that they could actually go and cut the timber on their own land, have it sawed, and it didn't have a Maritime Lumber Bureau stamp. on it. Well, now you have to. Lumber has to have a Maritime Lumber Bureau stamp. So, you know, things that I would see that would reduce cost for people, and certainly, you know, if somebody's going to do, you know, 5,000 homes in a subdivision, they're not going on the back 40 and cutting the logs, and so, you know, we tend to accommodate, but I don't want to see us move down a road where people in rural Nova Scotia are actually shut out of what they could do by using their own land and their own resources, and being able to build, you know, in a perfectly competent manner, and matter of fact, you know, sometimes being overly fussy, but certainly those homes didn't leak, and we have a history in Nova Scotia of probably people who were as much shipbuilders as they were anything, who built homes, and they did it all mortise and tenon and the craftsmanship. They didn't have any piece of paper to tell anybody that they were good at it or not. So I just worry that we throw out the baby with the bathwater and trying to make the world so perfect. Really, what this comes down to is some mechanism of accountability, so that when people spend their money, they get a product that's worth the dollar, and somebody should ensure that. And actually, to me, it might mean having more inspectors on the ground to see that during the construction process, that those buildings are built the way they should be. One of the problems that I run into more often in my constituency than any other problem, it's not necessarily the question of a leaky roof or windows or whatever, Mr. Speaker, but it's a question of, we have a development that carries on in 2 and 3 and 4 phases, and it may take, you know, may go over 20 years from the time the first house was built to when the last house was built. And what we find is that as new streets and whatever are being added to the development, then we run into issues of water problems and so on for the homes that have been there originally, problems that didn't exist simply because we've cut the timber around to make the new lots and so on. We get more runoff, and we have water problems. Members would know, I think, that the Shubenacadie River is the line between me and the member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley, and also borders the HRM part of his constituency. I think quite often, if you were to have a transit shot, you know, if a surveyor was to take a shot on the footings of a lot of the basements through Enfield, Elmsdale, Lance, he would find those footings aren't much higher than the Shubenacadie River. And I think that you know, this is an issue that I'd like to see a little more attention put to, that when developments are planned, that it's not just the culvert on the street is designed for the 100-year storm, but it's that those houses that we think will be there for 100 years are going to be able to withstand fairly average rainfall, etc., and maybe the 25-year storm rather than the 100-year storm when it comes to the movement of water throughout those developments. Mr. Speaker, those are the concerns that keep coming back to me on developments and on housing that has been around in my constituency for some years, and which seems to have, over time, more problems seem to be created as more development goes on. And not that the homes weren't built well in the first place. That's not the issue. Sometimes the construction of the development didn't accommodate for future development. So anyway, I see this bill, an act to protect the deposits of purchasers of newly built residential units. I would agree with the minister that it has some application. I don't see it as having great application, but I would see the issue of quality and warranty to be the bigger issue for people spending money for homes or condominiums. And I be interested to watch the bill proceed through the House and actually to see what the impact is in the future from this legislation in the real world in the province of Nova Scotia. So with those comments, I'll take my seat. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm pleased to join the debate today on this bill, number 212, the Homeowner Protection Act, and just have a few comments. But you know, before addressing a couple of the substantive issues that the bill raises, you know, as MLAs, we do hear in our offices from time to time situations where somebody has had a home built or somebody buys a home and they're coming to our office because during that first year or even a short time later discovering deficiencies with the home. We all come across that at one time or another. So I think you know, improvements upon the Home Warranty Act, Condominium Act are areas as well that we as legislators and government need to be advancing, because this is generally one's largest purchase in a lifetime, and we do need to have guarantee of quality, and if it isn't there, those who invest have some particular recourse. Now, you know, just listening to the honourable member from Hants East, who I do have great respect for, especially in his role as agriculture critic, I found it a little bit surprising that in some ways he was talking about the uncertified tradespeople. I'm not sure if he was trying to promote the underground economy, but I was even more surprised to hear him talking about the value of non-unionized labor. So those are interesting points that the member is making. I had a couple of points to pass on to the minister, and this is directly from a lawyer friend in my riding who has 15 years of experience dealing with home buying, land ownership, and I think he makes a couple of pretty you know, valid points. He does, first of all, applaud the government's goal of protecting homeowners who contract to purchase a new home on land which they do not own until construction is complete. And I think all of us here in the House do value that specific point of this bill, although we all see areas in which it needs to go further. However, the particulars of who is to be protected is left to the Governor and Council, and his submission here obviously is that it may leave too much discretion to the government on the real substance of the legislation. So this is a point which he makes, and I think many of us would well take as well. Also, if the legislation is applied to the construction of single-family homes, it will fundamentally alter the current way in which those construction contracts are carried out. For example, he points out that with many single-family home construction contracts, they're paid on a draw basis and not upon full completion. And these latter type contracts are called turnkey contracts. So on a draw basis, the contractor is paid a deposit and usually several draws based on the work completed, such as the foundation and roof tight stage. So the Act does not prescribe when such arrangements are appropriate, but again, leaves it to be determined by regulation. So that is a worrisome piece. Here's a lawyer who is bringing 15 years of experience to this, and he says he's contacting me because I have a concern that this Act may adversely affect small contractors who rely on the draw system to build homes for third parties. So unless that is you know, spelled out in the legislation that it should not apply, then there is some real concern around this aspect of the bill. So I wanted to bring those 2 points to attention to the minister and to government, that they should get strong consideration as this bill moves through the House. And I think it's another point that we'll hear when this bill does go to law amendments, and I look forward to a wider discussion around those 2 points that have been presented. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my place.
Thank you. If I recognize the minister, it'll be to close debate.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. And it's clearly the issue of as part of consumer protection is very important to members on all sides of the House. This debate has occupied approximately 2 hours. And, Mr. Speaker, very valid points. And I'd like to thank members on the opposite side of the House, as well as my own colleague from Bedford Birch Cove, who was very instrumental in putting this whole issue of the protection needs of condo owners in Metro in front of me and in front of government. So just the member from Halifax, Sable Island, Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island, have reference to the lack of consultation. Mr. Speaker, I was a little puzzled by that because I went back to the Novus report, which was tabled here the other day, and the input from Nova Scotia stakeholders, and if your permission, Speaker, I just want to quote a little bit from this. In the early stages, the investigation, numerous stakeholder groups were interviewed to gain a better understanding of the current situation. Among them, representatives of the construction industry, building trades organization, developers, inspection organizations, regulatory bodies, design professionals, engineers and architects, warranty, insurance and bonding companies, the real estate industry, the legal sector, consumer protection groups, homeowner associations, and other interested parties. In addition, there were an online survey available that was completed for new home buyers, and there were 131 completed responses to that survey. 80% of those came from condominium owners, 20% from newly constructed house freehold owners, and 3 not identified. And in addition, among those people, there was focus groups. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure that the honourable member understood the extent of the consultation that was made as a result of this. But anyway, Mr. Speaker, I do want to thank everyone who spoke on it. It is clearly an important first step in improving homeowner protection for new home buyers, particularly those in the condo market. And the other thing, Mr. Speaker, when something like this becomes public, quite often, without having to put additional regulatory things in place, the industry itself steps up to the plate and says we do have a problem, and this whole idea of education for prospective buyers would be very, very effective. And the other thing, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member from Kings West talked about the report that he got from the legal profession. Mr. Speaker, is right. These things will be clarified in the regulations, and hopefully, I think, the Novus Consulting did consult with the legal profession. I'm very confident these are not issues that are going to take away from the potential of the bill and subsequent steps. So, Mr. Speaker, I now ask you to call for the question on Bill 212, an act to protect deposits of purchasers of newly built residential units.
Good bill.
The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 212, Homeowner Protection Act. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? The motion is carried.
Bill 212, entitled an act to protect the deposits of purchasers of newly built residential units.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call private and local bills for second reading?
Private and local bills for second reading.
Thank you. Would you please call Bill number 213, East Hants Sportsplex Expansion Act?
Bill number 213, the East Hants Sportsplex. The Honourable the member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to move second reading of Bill 213, an act to authorize the municipality of the District of East Hants to aid in the funding of a multi-purpose sports complex. So I would guess from the title that members would be pretty much aware of the intent of this legislation. Mr. Speaker, the member for Halifax, Clayton Park, certainly the Minister for Health Promotion and Protection, the Minister of Agriculture, definitely constituents from the Minister of Agriculture's constituency certainly make use of that present facility. I mentioned the member from Halifax, Clayton Park, because I went to an opening of a tournament, and actually I think her son was playing in that tournament, and she was there. The member for Waverly Fall River Beaverbank, I know a fair number of his constituents come there on occasion to play hockey, and I have to thank the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection for a commitment that he made on behalf of the government. I think $5.2 million toward that expansion, I think 5.2 or 5.3. So I know the community there is very pleased with that. I'm not sure to this stage if they've gotten anything in writing from the minister on that. So I think they're kind of concerned that they get something a little more nailed down than the photo op that they got with the announcement. So this bill is, I guess, is basically a housekeeping bill at the request of the municipality of East Hants, or the council for the municipality of East Hants. It allows them to fulfill a commitment to help fund the expansion of the sportsplex, and outlines some alternative strategies that they may wish, roads they may wish to go down in doing that. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those few comments, I thank the government for calling this bill, and which I would see as an indication of support for this legislation. And so with that, I move second reading of Bill 213.
The Honourable, the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise and very briefly speak about this bill. And I want to speak, I guess, in some ways on behalf of my colleague, the Minister of Agriculture, who, as a resident of an adjacent municipality which uses that facility or on a regular basis, was very, very supportive of the money that came from HPP to go support it. And anyway, Mr. Speaker, this. I've been in that present facility. I used to spend a fair bit of time in there when I wasn't doing this, and was able to go around and watch hockey games at various parts of the province, and I'm very, very familiar with that. And also, earlier in the discussion, the member from Hants East talked about how rapidly growing that community is. Clearly, the expansion of that sportsplex is a very important thing to that community, not only the community of East Hants, but the adjacent parts of Halifax County, and actually going down into West Hants as well. So, Mr. Speaker, the fact that the council is now, if this legislation is passed, will be able to use municipal monies to help with the expansion of that sportsplex is a very good thing, Mr. Speaker, and I speak for this side of the House. We're very happy to see that legislation go forward.
The Honourable, the Minister of Immigration.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable, the Minister of Immigration.
There it goes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to be able to rise in support of Bill number 213, the East Hants Sportsplex Expansion Act. Mr. Speaker, it's wonderful to see these community groups looking for support from the municipality. I know I live in a community right now where we are as well trying to supplement, I hate to use the word lack of recreation facilities, but that's exactly what it is, through the construction of rinks, artificial turf soccer fields, and also field house for basketball and other indoor sports. Mr. Speaker, I think it's critical for municipalities to be able to jump in, to be able to work with groups, private groups, to be able to support the construction of facilities like this. I know that we've all talked about the growth in our communities, and I know that several people on this side of the House, as well as on the opposition and third party, also live in areas with significant growth where we're in very difficult times for access to recreation facilities. And I know in the Halifax Regional Municipality, probably in many other municipalities as well, there's a serious shortage right now for ice surfaces. And I know in my own community, Mr. Speaker, we have been very supportive of a volunteer board in their efforts to try to construct a single ice surface at this point in time, hopefully to see a triplex or quadruplex in the near future. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to see this bill before the House. Pleased that the members brought it forward. I think it's a very critical piece of legislation for that community, and I hope in the future that we see more of them here, because we really do need support from within community and support within government to ensure that community and municipalities can work together. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'll take my seat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Mr. Speaker, I too am pleased to take a few minutes of the time in the House today to speak about this particular bill. The member who introduced the bill had a question as to whether or not a written commitment was given to the Society. I would point out to the member that a written commitment was given to the Society, and it was handed to them at the announcement earlier in the summer as we announced that particular project, as we do with all projects, Mr. Speaker. I want to, though, pay particular attention and respect to the community who is doing a great job raising funds to help construct this facility. As members would know, we announced last year, during the last, not this most recent budget, but the budget before that, our new BFIT program, which is building facilities and infrastructure together. And an important component of that is community involvement, engagement in the construction of recreation facilities. And when we rolled out the program a year ago, initially it was a $5 million commitment from the province of Nova Scotia, being matched by 2/3 from other partners, other levels of government. We've since expanded that to $8 million, Mr. Speaker. And over the period of 10 years, we'll see an investment with all partners of $240 million in recreation infrastructure in the province of Nova Scotia. It's something that we on this side of the House are extremely proud of, and we recognize the fact that we are meeting and taking care of one of the obstacles that many communities have with respect to becoming a healthier and safer society, and that is the obstacle of access to recreation facilities. I'll tell the member opposite who introduced the bill that I've been in that facility a number of times. I participated this year, in their golf fundraiser and had an opportunity to meet with the board of directors and others as they talked about their project, raised money. It was a very successful fundraiser held at a local golf course, and I think the largest I've ever seen. But it shows the support of community groups and organizations and businesses who embrace this facility, but also embrace a culture of becoming fitter, healthier, and safer, one that we believe is important for us to tackle that burden of an unhealthy province, Mr. Speaker. I gave my staff, when I first became the minister, a broad and substantial goal, and that is the goal of making Nova Scotia the healthiest and safest province in the country. It's one that they have embraced, Mr. Speaker, but they've embraced because they know the importance of it. But more importantly to me, and the part that I guess that I believe that is important to all Nova Scotians, is the fact that Nova Scotians have embraced the concept of becoming the healthiest and safest province in the country. And this particular project is a prime example of that. I know that the hard work from people like Tom Hunter, who's worked hard on behalf of the Board of Directors to lead this project, people like Steve Potty, who is the manager of the facility out there, who works very hard to make that facility a viable facility. It's just one reason why they have been so successful and will continue to be successful. And I know, Mr. Speaker, of many people, people that I went to school with, that I've since re-met as a result of that announcement, who've put their heart and soul into that facility, not only for themselves, but for their family members. But, you know, this is just one example, Mr. Speaker, of many examples where we've been able to go across the province and meet that unmet need and help municipalities and community groups develop very important recreation infrastructure so that we can achieve that goal of becoming the healthiest and safest province in the country. And as I have moved around the province on behalf of the government as the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection, it makes me so proud that we have community groups and organizations that have picked up the challenge that has been laid out before them and are doing what they need to do to help address those unmet needs. And I can tell you that we've been to communities like Bear River and Weymouth, where they're developing the Bear River Sissibu Trail, a multi-use trail that will enable many, many people to be able to participate in outdoor physical activity. We've been to Acadia University, for example, where we were able to invest in their field and their track around the grounds at Acadia University. And some would wonder, you know, why is it we're investing in university sport? Well, in that case, it's not just university sport. They've signed a community use agreement where that facility can be used by communities and others, and I can point to a real example. Special Olympics recently held their Summer Olympics at Acadia University, but there are many, many examples where we've been able to go out with our 1/3 investment, in some cases smaller than that, leverage another 2/3 and meet those community unmet needs. As I continue to tell municipalities, it's ultimately their responsibility to provide these kinds of infrastructure, but as a province, I think without the kind of help that we've been able to supply through our BFIT program, these projects might not otherwise have occurred. East Hants, I could remind the member, he wasn't sure of the exact amount. It was actually $5,632,000 that the province committed. We've also committed an additional $3 million to Cape Breton University. That's funding that will help provide for indoor soccer, an artificial track and field, as well as a wellness center, which is an important initiative. We've provided $350,000 to the Church Memorial Arena, Mr. Speaker, and I believe that's in the constituency of Chester. That's to provide for major mechanical and electrical upgrades that otherwise would not have occurred. King's Trail Society, Mr. Speaker, we were there not that long ago and announced trail development in Cambridge to Annapolis County line. The South Shore Annapolis Valley Rec Trail Association, $185,000, Mr. Speaker. The St. Francis Xavier University, contribution towards the development of track and field, $700,000 towards what I believe was more than a $2 million project. Hants Aquatic Center in the riding of Hants West, my colleague from Hants West, very proud of the fact that we were able to make a contribution to that particular project, $180,000. Cape Breton Regional Municipality. The list goes on and on and on and on, Mr. Speaker. These are projects that are very valuable to the community. I want to talk a little bit about one, the Dartmouth YMCA. We were there this summer and announced $153,000. These are the kinds of projects that impact communities. So with that being said, I do support the bill. I think it's the right approach to involve municipalities, community groups, the province through our BFIT program, and other levels of government to help work together as a team to address the unmet needs. Mr. Speaker, the ability for us to be able to provide facilities is taking care of one obstacle. As a government, we've addressed other obstacles like the cost of sport by investment in kids sport, Mr. Speaker, by our program that now provides up to $500 tax credit for children, and now expanded, Mr. Speaker, to all Nova Scotians who enroll in physical activity programs, Mr. Speaker. These were initiatives brought forward during the budget process. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time, but I'd like to remind the members opposite, particularly the New Democrats, Mr. Speaker, that they didn't support that budget and therefore didn't support those initiatives. But I think these are the kinds of initiatives that will go a long way to help make Nova Scotia a healthier and safer province. It's a mandate that our department has been given. It's one that we will fulfill with the hard work of 1 million Nova Scotians who are dedicated to the exact same commitment that we have, Mr. Speaker. So with those few words, I want to say that I too will be supporting the bill. I support the community initiative in East Hants, and I know so does the council. I've spoken directly with councillors in the area and the warden, and I know so does the community, Mr. Speaker, and that's why I believe it's the right approach. And with that, I will now take my seat.
If I recognize the member, it'll be to close debate. The Honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the members on the government side who spoke. I appreciate their comments very much. It gives me an opportunity to...
Order, please. The Honourable member for Hants East has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives me an opportunity to thank the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection for his announcement in my constituency, and the government for their commitment to funding. I guess when I asked about a written commitment, I was just wondering about the process of when he gets the check written. But anyway, I'll pick his brain on that a little bit later. I do want to say, although because members may not be aware, but the East Hants Arena Association, which is really the board that controls the management actually of the sportsplex there. This is a facility that has no debt. They've got money in the bank, and this is a very well managed facility in this province. It gets a lot of use. Matter of fact, the comment about ice time, it's just about impossible. It's booked all the time. So they deserve credit for what they've been able to do. They've stuck well to their agenda, and they've shown people that they could run this facility and do it well, and they deserve congratulations and help for what they've been able to do, Mr. Speaker. And so with those comments, I close debate on Bill 213.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for second reading of Bill number 213, East Hants Sportsplex Expansion Act. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against? The motion is carried.
Bill 213, title an act to authorize the municipality of the District of East Hants to aid in the funding of a multi-purpose sports complex.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Private and Local Bills. The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 216, the Crosby Memorial Trust Fund Act?
Bill number 216, the Crosby Memorial Trust Act. The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to speak for a few minutes on this bill. Beg the indulgence of the House as I speak a little bit about some of the history of the Crosby Centre, since it is pertinent to the bill. The Crosby Centre, as some members will know, is an addiction treatment facility. When I first was elected in 1999, it was housed in the old sanatorium, which, due to mold problems, was due to be torn down. This, of course, caused an enormous problem for both the Crosby Centre and for Fidelis House, because both of them were housed in this facility and both had free rent. So, Mr. Speaker, it seemed like my first term in office was tied up in large part with both those institutions, the Fidelis House and Crosby Centre. Fidelis House, Mr. Speaker, just to give you some historical background on that as well. Fidelis House was is an organization whose main task was to provide low-income housing for patients who came to the Valley Regional Hospital from other districts. And it had about 100 volunteers in our area. And although it was my people who were volunteering at Fidelis House and putting in the time and effort, really the people they were caring for were coming from the Yarmouth area, from Clare, from Argyll, from areas like that. So I was fortunate, Mr. Speaker, because of the reality of that, to get the Minister of Finance at the time to help, because most of the people, a lot of the people being helped at Fidelis House were being helped from his area, and we were able to get a loan guarantee, and they erected a building on the grounds of the Valley Regional Hospital owned by the District Health Authority, and the Fidelis House with the loan guarantee was back in operation, and in fact has paid off the loan guarantee, Mr. Speaker, because some of the beds that they constructed in the facility were for visiting physicians who were working at Valley Regional, and they were charging the rent back for that, and so it all worked out well for Fidelis House. For Crosby Centre, which was also located in that same building and had to find new facilities, it was a far more rocky road that they had to go along. And so one of the things that we did in order to help out Crosby Centre was when Crosby Centre closed down because they had no facility to be in, we created the Crosby Centre Foundation, Mr. Speaker, and this was with the help of John Crosby, who was a relative of Martha Crosby, brother-in-law of Martha Crosby, and the late widow of Dr. Crosby, in whose name this facility was established. And so the Crosby House Foundation was set up with a private member's bill, Mr. Speaker, but because at that time there was no Crosby Centre operating, the bill simply stated that the money would go to fund addictions training within the district, the Annapolis Valley Healthcare District, and we named the people who would be on the board, and one who would be in perpetuity would be Martha Crosby or someone from the Crosby family, since most of the money that was given to the Crosby Centre was given really in recognition and honor of what her husband had done in setting up this centre. The feeling at the time, and I was really offside with my government on this one a bit, but I understand what they were moving towards, because when the Crosby Centre no longer had a facility to operate in, the government shifted its focus and attention to the Addiction Centre for the Annapolis Valley Health Authority, which was then really in Middleton at the time. And they shifted models as well, Mr. Speaker. There was an emphasis at the time, and the Premier, Dr. Ham, as a physician, agreed with this emphasis on harm reduction in addiction treatment. And the Crosby Centre model, Mr. Speaker, was not a harm reduction model, it was an abstinence model. And there were two models here, and I was arguing that we really needed both models to serve the population of Nova Scotia well, and the argument that came back to me, not articulated very well for a long time, but finally, at least they articulated, was that if you look at addictions on a pyramid with the majority of population not being addicted and then moving up to the pyramid, that the harm reduction model really targets the middle of that pyramid, and so therefore, to use a rather colloquial expression, you get more bang for your buck in putting your money into harm reduction. That does make sense if you're talking simply about risk management and about efficient use of funds. The problem is that those at the very top of the pyramid, those who suffer the greatest addictions, Mr. Speaker, are not helped by the harm reduction model. They're helped by the abstinence model. It's the only model that's proven to be of any help to them. Anyway, I'm going on quite a while. My House Leader would like me to elucidate fully, but the opposition would prefer me to tone it down. So I think I'll take my cue from the opposition rather than from my House Leader. I may get in trouble for that. But the point is, thank you very much, honourable member from Yarmouth. The honourable member of Yarmouth is chiming in as well. Let me just get then to this bill. So the Crosby Centre, which focused upon abstinence, is a model that we have to have in Nova Scotia. It complements, it's not the only model, the harm reduction model is good, but the abstinent model is absolutely necessary. And so I was delighted when Crosby Centre was reborn in a different location. They managed to buy a property in New Minas, and I was there with the member from Kings West and the member from Kings South when the new Crosby Centre was inaugurated, dedicated, whatever you want to use. There was a huge crowd, Mr. Speaker, because this Crosby Centre had been used by companies such as Michelin, by Member 2 Band, by different 14-wing Greenwood, by many different businesses, because it is the only model that works for certain people. And so I was delighted when it came back into operation. And so having been in operation now, I'm not sure the member from Kings West might remember better. I think it's about 2 years now where we're at. It seems a propitious time to revisit the private members bill. And what we're changing it is really that the funding be used for the Crosby Centre, which is now up and running once again. And so that's really the change to the bill, to the private members bill, and I just wanted to give a little bit of that history to the honourable members, and with those few words I shall take my seat.
Thank you.
To close debate on Bill 216.
The motion before the House is for second reading of Bill number 216, the Crosby Memorial Trust Fund Act. Is the House ready for the question? All those in favour? Aye. Against? The motion is carried.
Bill number 216, an act to amend Chapter 17 of the Acts of 2003, the Crosby Memorial Trust Fund Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Private and Local Bills. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call private members' public bills for second reading?
Private members' public bills for second reading.
Thank you. Bill number 189, Miners Memorial Day Act.
Bill number 189, the Miners Memorial Act. The Honourable the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure Renewal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Honourable Deputy House Leader for calling this bill, Bill number 189, Miners Memorial Day Act. Mr. Speaker, just at the outset I want to indicate to the House, as a result of discussions with my colleagues, the member for Cape Breton Centre, the member for Glace Bay, and another lady I'm going to mention here in a moment, that I'll be introducing an amendment, law amendments, that we will rename this bill. It'll be called the William Davis Miners Memorial Day Act. Certainly want to thank my colleagues opposite for their intervention and to ensuring that the Davis family had their wishes reflected in this bill. Mr. Speaker, this morning we spoke to the granddaughter of Mr. William Davis, Norma McDonald. I believe she lives in Waterford, Dominion. Sorry, she lives in Dominion. She lives in Dominion, and spoke to her. Spoke to this fine lady this morning to assure her that. When I first tabled this bill, that it was to bring some formal recognition to all miners in Nova Scotia, and that certainly look for her input in regards to what this bill would officially be named. And Mr. Speaker, I believe Ms. McDonald, the granddaughter of William Davis, I think will be pleased and is pleased with as a result of this act now being named the William Davis Miners Memorial Day Act. Mr. Speaker, I know that there's members opposite that are from mining communities, and I'm sure are going to want to have some comments in regards to this bill. I do want to say, Mr. Speaker, that being born and raised in Spring Hill, a mining community known around the world, that has seen many disasters over the years, as has two other communities I represent, River Hibbert and Joggins. We've had disasters where many lives have been taken, and we've had disasters, Mr. Speaker, where young men and boys on their own have died in mining accidents, sometimes singly. A good neighbor of mine, Mr. Chubbuck Master, I know died in 1969, and although we don't officially recognize on a regular basis these miners who died on their own, such as Chubb did, I know I spoke to his wife here a while ago, and you know, any death like that is as important as when we have a great many dying disasters as such we've had. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this bill will now formally recognize and pay tribute to all miners in Nova Scotia who have died over the years. Mr. Speaker, in Spring Hill, for example, in 1891, a disaster at that time, we saw the men and boys, 125 died at that time. In 1956, there were 39 in the 56 explosion in Spring Hill. And in 1958, Mr. Speaker, there were 75 who died in the bump. And Mr. Speaker, the bump, as many from mining communities would know, a bump is where in the coal mine, Mr. Speaker, where the floor actually goes up and hits the roof. And you can imagine the devastation in a coal mine as a result of such a tragedy. But you know, Mr. Speaker, a few weeks ago, I had the pleasure to attend some ceremonies in Spring Hill where a group of volunteers came together. They were led by such people as Valerie Alderson, who's a lady who I grew up with. Her maiden name was Tabor. Her dad was killed in the mines in the bump. Jim McDonald, his dad was killed. Brenda Bourne, his father died. And Bill Kemp, his dad died. And these folks, along with many others, have been working for a number of months to, it was called Remembering 58. And it was 50 years, Mr. Speaker, since a bump in Spring Hill. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, I have to give full credit to them because they brought together a very emotional time for a lot of people, Mr. Speaker. But I believe you know, it's an opportunity to bring closure to some people's lives in regards to the events that happened in communities across the province, and especially in Spring Hill. Mr. Speaker, at that time, on Thursday, the 23rd, there was actually unveiling of plaques at the pit head, number 2 and number 4 pit head. And then later that evening, there was a candlelight vigil service. Mr. Speaker, it was attended by in excess of 1,100 people in our community center. And then, Mr. Speaker, later on the next evening, Peggy Seeger, who is well known in our area for writing of songs in regards to the mines, and as well the Men of the Deeps from Cape Breton, were in attendance. And Mr. Speaker, there were, you know, my understanding is around 1,400 people attended that event. So, Mr. Speaker, my communities of Spring Hill and River Haven and Joggins have a deep history in regards to mining, particularly coal mining, and they're very appreciative of the efforts of volunteers to bring this together. Sunday evening, Mr. Speaker, there was an ecumenical service that was held. Could have been economical. It actually, what I'm going to say, it actually turned out to be quite economic for a benefit for a lot of organization individuals, Mr. Speaker. But at that time, Mr. Speaker, there was a lady who spoke that evening, and her name is Cheryl Curtis. And I asked Cheryl if I could just mention a few of the comments she made that evening, and with her permission, Mr. Speaker. And one thing she talked about that night that I wasn't aware of, and grew up in Spring Hill and didn't know this, but 50 years ago, the year of the bump, the Anglican Church actually started bringing a lot of money. Y'all members helped me, says before my time. Not quite, I wish it was, but the Anglican Church actually, as a result of the bump in Spring Hill, a lot of money was donated, and they quickly realized they didn't have a process or to be able to help disperse those funds. So at that time, the Anglican Church developed what was called the Primates World Relief Fund, and she mentioned that night how that was started 50 years ago, and how that's turned into, as a result of that tragedy in Spring Hill, how it's turned into such a benefit for not only communities and individuals in Canada, but from around the world. And Mr. Speaker, you know, she talked that night about where the money goes for such things as children and AIDS and things throughout the world. And I think that it speaks well to the lives of these miners, Mr. Speaker, who bravely gave their lives, and as a result of that tragedy, such a positive thing happened. Mr. Speaker, some of the comments she made, she said, the memories you have of the courage of those who face death, the men who struggle, the dragomen who faced impossible odds to rescue friends and neighbors, the work of the funeral directors and ministers, the care of the doctors and nurses, the care of each neighbor. All these memories have brought courage to the hearts of untold others. Courage, hope, and connection. Mr. Speaker, she went on to say that she talked about a miner's code, and I know those from mining communities would know well that One of the code within miners, that, in particular when there's a tragedy like this, is that no miners are left behind. And I can tell you, some of the stories that I've heard about the bump and the heroic events that took place and the personal commitment by miners who returned time and time again underground to dig in holes, Mr. Speaker, that would be barely 2.5, 3 feet square, and would dig through literally hundreds of feet of debris and coal to save their brother miners. Some of the stories, Mr. Speaker, are just beyond belief. And Cheryl mentioned this night, she said some of her comments were, danger is part of a miner's reality. In what other conditions do you tag in and out as an indication of your location or survival? In what other working conditions do we require a lunchroom that is also a safe place stocked with food and water? In what other working conditions are earthquakes a regular occurrence? And so it goes to follow that miners show up for each other and know the depth of solidarity. A mining community is a connected community, one that shares food, shares grief, shares history, shares the danger kept at bay, and the danger that claimed its members. Danger is our livelihood, is part of our maritime history. Mining, fishing, and forestry are evidence of this. She went on to say, Mr. Speaker, that while grief and memory of that moment, the bump is still with us, I want to tell you of another way. And she goes on to talk about this what I just mentioned a moment ago, that she said out of the tragedy has come the remarkable hope. The story of the Primates World Relief and Development Fund is a great example. And I guess, Mr. Speaker, to say that after 50 years, the Anglican Church of Canada has contributed $90 million to development and relief through this fund. And to think, Mr. Speaker, it started as a result of the tragedy in Spring Hill that was recognized a few days ago. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to talk long on this. I know some of my colleagues want to speak about the mines and what this legislation means for their community. I do want to say, though, Mr. Speaker, that I was fortunate enough not to have a father or grandfather or brother lost in any of these tragedies, but certainly a lot of friends of mine did. One of my best friends growing up, his name was Norman LeBlanc. I think Norman had 7 or 8 brothers and sisters, and their dad, Abby, died. And it's just there were 75 miners that died in Spring Hill during that year. And you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, a one-industry community such as Spring Hill that relied solely on coal mining, several thousand population at the time, to have 75 fathers and brothers die, and then have so many mothers left to deal with the raising of families, big families at that time. And I think the House would agree, Mr. Speaker, back then we certainly didn't have the resources or the supports in place that we see today. And many of these folks, Mr. Speaker, were left to basically fend on their own, to find ways to provide for their families, their children, and they did it, Mr. Speaker. They were very creative in ways to prepare for their children, to ensure they raised them to be good community people. And Mr. Speaker, you remember a few weeks ago we brought in three of the last survivors that were trapped. There are more than the 3, but the 3 that were trapped the longest, Mr. Speaker, for a period of 9 days, we introduced in the House here. Mr. Herb Pepperdine, Mr. Garnet Clark, and Harold Bryan. Mr. Speaker, they were brought in, they were introduced to the House, and they were survivors of that bump and actually attended those festivities. But there were other people, Mr. Speaker, that did survive that are known across this, certainly across the province and outside this country. People like Maurice Reddick, who died a few years ago, but was known as the singing miner, and kept the spirits alive of these men and boys underground for days and days at a time, and so much we owe to people like that. The other thing I'm very proud of, Mr. Speaker, is that we earlier this year we named the 104 Highway as Miners Memorial Highway. I just was told today that the permanent signs, in fact, are being ready to be placed up now. That will be a reminder forever, Mr. Speaker, of the mining history and heritage of Nova Scotia for people who travel on that major highway throughout Nova Scotia. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it's something that is long overdue, and I'm very proud of. Mr. Speaker, as I say, I know there are others who want to speak today about mining and the heritage and what it means to their community. So I just want to end off, my Speaker, by saying that I believe this legislation is something that has been long overdue, that will pay respect to men and boys who went underground for many, many years to provide for their communities, their families, And a lot of them ultimately end up giving the sacrifice of their lives. And I think that I'm sure that after discussion with my colleagues, I know there's support for this legislation. And I look forward to moving forward so that we'll now officially in Nova Scotia know that June 11th every year will be known as William Davis Miners Memorial Day. And I look forward to that, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to comments from my colleagues. Thank you very much.
The Honourable, the member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, let me thank the minister for being thoughtful in the way he approached this bill and certainly looked for consensus. And it was not a one-off bill. It was not a bill to upstage anybody. What it was the intent of the bill is as advertised, if you will, Mr. Speaker, and it was to really point out a pinnacle time in our history about a man, especially where I come from, that really the family name strikes a chord with everybody. And before I get too far into that, I want to thank the input of William Davis's grandchildren, and you know, they were very cordial and respectful of what we wanted to do, and certainly were encouraged. And when the minister talked with some of the family members this morning, they understood the intent and were extremely gratified that the proposed amendment that hopefully will get passed, I'm sure it will, that reflect their grandfather's name. And I appreciate the minister doing that. You know, this is something that, as a son of a coal miner, means a lot. Because, and being active in the trade union movement, because many would tell you that that day was the day that the concrete was poured for the foundation of the labor movement in Nova Scotia. The day, sad to say, that the day William Davis was killed. But it's a day that you know, it still evokes a lot of memories to people that weren't even alive on that day. And you know, I heard the minister speak about the camaraderie of coal miners, and it's like no other. I can remember probably around the time someone said about the minister that he wasn't around then, around the time of the bump, but roughly around somewhere 58, 1960. We grew up in New Waterford in a place called 12 Square. Now, in and around those coal mining towns, you were known from the area where you came from where the colliery was related. So there was like 16 and 12, 14, 17. These were all names of collieries. And as kids, that was as much our playground as what kids would see today with green fields and so on. We would actually hang around these things, as unsafe as that may seem. But we knew the miners. The miners would, most of them didn't have cars then, so they'd walk through people's yards up to the 3 o'clock shift, and then come home from there at 11 o'clock, and they'd be passing miners that would be going out on what we refer to as the back shift, 11 to 7 shift. And I can remember in the area where I grew up, 12 Square, there was a Mr. McPherson who lived on the bottom of Common Street, was killed while working at number 12. And what was done at that time was that if the accident was not too disfiguring, if I can use that term, that they would lay the miner out in what would be the medic's room and allow his fellow workers to pay their respects to their fallen brother. And I remember that was probably the first time as someone who was 5-7 years old, seeing that and seeing the death, and here's this bare-faced miner, still dirty from the awful work he was doing, and that was like, wow, when you saw that and you understood it. And you know, back then times were different. That it was more common that they would allow the remains to go home, and that's where the wake would take place. And I remember, like, miners would be coming down. They lived, again, at the bottom of Convent Street, and miners that would be coming off the shift, cutting through the back
yards there would actually stop into McPherson's and pay their respects and move on from there. And clearly, you know, that forged, in my mind, a lot of what I had done in my adult life and representing working women and men and the hazards that they faced. But, you know, and that was also easy abided by that. I had a father that was a coal miner for almost 48 years. And it was tough work. And I remember, as they say, in the early 60s, there was more supper times than suppers. There was 15 of us in our family, and mining wages weren't that great. And, you know, as great as the miners were, I got to say the miners' wives were spectacular. So you could make a pot of soup go a long way, and that's what Mother did for our family. And so we survived on miners' wages, and we survived by the type of work and the type of community you lived in because of that. That, you know, that not only were miners and their fellow workers thick, but it brought the whole community together. The whole community. You rode that rise of exhilaration, and you dipped with that depression with it. But you did it all together. You didn't. There was nobody out in the community freelancing, if you will. It was certainly a community that had an interest. And, you know, Speaker, that when you think of it, the tragedies and loss of life, and when you think today, and I understand when we talk about energy needs today, and people say, well, you know, we got to watch CO2 and greening, and I understand that, and I support that. But I also want people to remember that, you know, when this nation, was facing crisis during war, whether it's the First or Second World War, who fueled the economies? Who fueled the boats going overseas? Who did that? Was Nova Scotia Coal, Mr. Speaker. In the 70s, when we had the oil crisis, so to speak, who stepped in to keep the lights on in Nova Scotia? It was Nova Scotia coal miners. So whatever a person may think of the fuel, let's not ever lose sight of the real cost of that fuel. And you know, a term that I'm sure the minister knows much better than I do, blood on the coal. And there was plenty of it, Mr. Speaker. But, you know, and there's the tragedy of those that their lives was taken instantaneously in the mine. But, you know, we still, in my community, still have literally hundreds of workers that are dying a slow death, whether it's through silicosis or some form of pulmonary disease because of working in coal mines. And when you talk to these people who can barely string 3 words together because they do not have enough air capacity in their lungs, and you ask them, you say, you know, well, I guess you'd never want to do that again. And they shake their head and say, no way. That they've never met a finer bunch of people in all their lives. That they've, you know, it's God gave me what God gave me, but I'd never back off an inch. They're, for the friendship they made, for the time that they supported their families, you know, these are workers that will show you when you go in their house, like the idea of they've got sons and daughters and now grandchildren that have gone from universities, that are doctors and lawyers and all kinds of interesting opportunities because of what they figured they gave to them by being a coal miner. And they're proud of that because it was good, honest work. Tough work. And, you know, I'm not going to gloss over the fact that clearly that in a time, not only in Nova Scotia, but throughout North America, when workers were taken advantage of and they were made to work in unsafe conditions for poverty wages. And that's what brought William Davis. That's what brought William Davis to the power plant at Waterford Lake. that infamous day. There was a strike going on, and as you know, doubt aware, Mr. Speaker, that the companies owned everything. They owned the stores that gave the miners credit, down to the basic electrical needs. During the strike, the employers cut off the power at the power plant at Waterford Lake, and a group of miners went out to reestablish that, and they were met by provincial police at the time, and William Davis, who had joined the group to come out there, had left a young son at home, went out through Scotchtown, out to Waterford Lake, was shot and killed at that time. And, you know, truly a tragedy of unspeakable terms, because, as I said earlier, it reverberates today. You go to these commemoration ceremonies in whether it's New Waterford, Dominion, Glace Bay, as it was this year in Port Morion, throughout Pictou County, in through Spring Hill. You know, you can't help but get that shiver in your spine when you hear some of these tragic tales retold. So it's very, very, I guess an easy way to say it was very good to see this bill. But, Minister, it's necessary. This bill is necessary to recognize a segment of our workforce that had brought us and made us the province we are today in many, many ways. I would go to say that for sheer paying the ultimate sacrifice, the only thing that's in front of them would be our fine military. Outside of that, the people these people, if you look what that was extracted from them by this province as a group of employees, I don't think they can be compared with anybody else. And, you know, this is not a time to take away from any other group of workers, but if you think about what they did and how they supplied us with the needed energy. You know, we don't have to go too far back in the history books to think about Westray and what was paid for there. And, you know, when we talk about certain things that the miners fought for in this legislature, automatic assumption through Workers' Compensation Board, just a truly needed piece of legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, while I wholeheartedly support the bill, I do it very humbly, because I will never be the person my father was. But if this bill pays him any homage, I say thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. The Honourable, the member for Glace Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise and say a few words regarding Bill 189. And I am extremely happy to hear that the minister has decided to name this bill William Davis Miners Memorial Day. And I agree with my colleague from Cape Breton Centre that the minister did this in a consensus sort of manner and spoke to both myself and my colleague from Cape Breton Centre, but also took the time to call a member of the Davis family. And that member was his granddaughter, Norma MacDonald, who's been very active in Davis Day ceremonies back at home for years now, and has any Davis Day ceremony that I've been able to attend, I know that Norma and her family have been there to lay a wreath in his honor. So it means a tremendous amount to them. I want to congratulate the member for Cape Breton Centre, who quite eloquently has stated that he is indeed the son of a coal miner. I am not the son of a coal miner. I've been called the son of a...
Order, please.
Mr. Speaker, I've been called the grandson of a coal miner, Mr. Speaker, as a matter of fact, which I am, and quite proudly so, Mr. Speaker. My grandfather, Fred Yates, spent some 46 years mining coal in Cape Breton, came over from Wales when he was 12 years old because he had a great job in the coal mines of Cape Breton at a great salary. You can imagine
what it was. He was glad to be here and glad to be working in the mines. And you talk about the fabric of a coal miner, and again, my colleague from Cape Breton Centre made reference to what kind of special people they are. This was a man who got up when it was dark and walked about 5 miles to go down in a coal mine for the entire day, and came outside when it was dark again and walked 5 miles back home for 46 years. I think that says something about the fabric of coal miners, Mr. Speaker. You know, June 11th, and again, when my colleague from Cape Breton Centre made reference to the foundation of the labour movement in this province was unfortunately sparked by the incident on June 11th and the shooting of Bill Davis. It's not a part of history that we like to put out there as something that was favourable. It was a black mark on the history of Nova Scotia. It should never have happened, but it did. In naming this bill William Davis Miners Memorial Day, that ensures that will never be forgotten. It also ensures that the several hundred miners who have lost their lives throughout this province over the years will be remembered forever as well. Mr. Speaker, I can remember vividly when I was a grade 12 student of Morrison High School in Glace Bay, that our grade 12 history teacher religiously with every grade 12 class would take us down underground in a coal mine so that we would know exactly what it was like to be underground. And on this particular occasion, our history teacher, Evan Kennedy, took us down in what was called number 26 colliery, because as all the collieries had their numbers, and again, my colleague from Cape Breton Centre is right, that's how the communities were called, because of the number of the collieries that were there. But he took us down to the face of number 26 colliery, an actual working coal mine, during an actual shift. And when you got down there, I think his purpose was, and it served a purpose, you either decided whether or not you wanted to work in a coal mine or whether or not you never wanted to be in a coal mine again, Mr. Speaker. And that would have been in 1974. That very same coal mine, 5 years later, there would be a fire. 12 men would lose their lives in that coal mine, in that fire. And I can remember recalling, I was working in the media at the time, that when I reported on that story of that fire at that mine, vividly remembering being down in that coal mine, that very same coal mine. Believe me, reality hit home at that point as to whether or not it was a dangerous occupation. We all know that, Mr. Speaker. We all know that what the minister is doing is going to ensure that their memories will live on forever. There's a tremendous facility in Glace Bay that I would urge all members of this House and everyone in this province to pay a visit to at one time or another. It's called the Cape Breton Miners Museum. It's located in Glace Bay. It has an actual coal mine, not a working coal mine, but an exhibit coal mine that you can go down underground, get a little taste of actually what it's like. It has exhibits there from coal mining history throughout the decades. And it also has an actual ride on a car, or a rake as they used to call it, that you can sit on and get some sort of a sensation as to what it was like to go underground. Mr. Speaker, it was with a great deal of honor and pleasure that I was able to, and although we haven't made the official presentation, that I was able to, thanks to Democracy 250 and to the funding that we were given for Democracy 250, it was with a great deal of honor and pleasure that I chose as my legacy project the Miners Museum. And I was able to give $10,000 to the Miners Museum to ensure that their exhibits, every exhibit from now on in the Miners Museum, will be translated in French. Previous to that, it had only been in English, and they were having more than a few complaints from visitors from Quebec and elsewhere who said there's no French translation for us to enjoy this museum tour. That will now be done. The process is already underway thanks to the funding from Democracy 250, and I'm glad to have participated in that legacy project, Mr. Speaker. Again, there's not much you can say when you grow up in a mining community, as I have, when you grow up in a mining community as my colleague from Cape Breton Centre. My colleague from Cape Breton North grew up in a mining community as well. And of course, the minister, who grew up in mining communities. You know the importance of coal mining. You know the importance that it was to the economy of Nova Scotia over the years. You know the role it played, and you know the tremendous people that have been involved in the history of coal mining. Mr. Speaker, we all know that if you spend 40-some years in a coal mine, it's not the same as if you spent 40-some years in some other job or perhaps another industry, Mr. Speaker. They are hard years, and as my colleague from the NDP has stated, they've taken their toll on the men who worked in those mines for many, many years, Mr. Speaker, and our thoughts are always with them. But again, I'm this is a very proud moment. The minister has just took the initiative to name a highway in his area, Miners Memorial Highway. The highway is 104. Mr. Minister, we have a Highway 104 in Cape Breton too, and other highways. Perhaps you want to take a look at perhaps naming some of them, Mr. Minister. I'll leave that thought in your mind. Perhaps you want to continue the 104 right through to Glace Bay would be fine by me, Mr. Minister. If you wanted to name that one, we'll be. We'll plant a seed there, Mr. Minister, and leave it with you. But again, Mr. Speaker, it's been it's something that the minister brought this to light, and Davis Day, by the way, as the minister rightly pointed out, has been celebrated across this province. Davis Day in Cape Breton to this very day is recognized by the Cape Breton Regional Municipality to the effect that in mining communities in Cape Breton, you still get half a day off school. The schools and businesses actually close for half a day on June 11th each year. And there was, the last ceremony that I attended was in Louisbourg. My colleague from Cape Breton Centre was there, Port Morion rather, was there as well. And in Port Morion, there was a huge crowd that attended the church service. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, you were there as well. I know that's in your, that's in your constituency. I didn't mean to leave you out. You were front and center, Mr. Speaker. And the tremendous crowd that was there in the church service and the crowd that took part in the ceremonies as well, Mr. Speaker, I think speaks rather loudly the fact that people still remember, still honor Bill Davis and how he lost his life and what it means to Cape Breton and to coal mining across this province. So I don't want to speak any longer, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to again congratulate the minister. We're happy to work with you on this and again to commemorate the history of coal mining, the loss of coal miners, and the loss of Mr. Davis by naming this bill and introducing the William Davis Miners Memorial Day Act. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's with pride and humbleness and just a great pleasure for me to stand in this House and commend the minister for the way he has handled bringing in this bill, Bill 189, and the fact that he did make an amendment in it, because I too remember mentioning in the corridor to him about the importance of Davis Day and keeping William Davis's name in the Memorial Day. So for me, Mr. Speaker, this is a time when we remember certainly the William Davis incident, but it is also a time when we remember so many people that were lost in the pits, and certainly lost in the pits in Pictou County. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to imagine that Pictou County lost more men in the pits than it did in World War I, World War II, and the Korean War. And Pictou County certainly, by proportion, by ratio, contributed to those wars. But the number of losses in the pit have been phenomenal. And they are spread out over almost 200 years. and certainly the Allen Shaft explosion and the Drummond explosion and so many others that occurred, and Westray, certainly the last on May the 9th, 1992, when 26 miners were killed in that very tragic incident, methane gas incident at Plymouth, which is in my constituency. And Mr. Speaker, I just want to, I think part of the pride that I have here today is the fact that my father, on the day that William Davis was killed, was shot dead in Cape Breton, my dad was an 18-year-old coal miner in Pictou County. My grandfather, Seymour McKinnon, was a 39-year-old coal miner in Pictou County. My mother's father was a 40-year-old coal miner in Pictou County. Together, they spent over 100 years in the pit. 100 years plus. So certainly my remembrances are one of a young boy coming home from school and finding my dad on several occasions had been smashed up in the pit. And I remember one incident as a young boy going with him after he had his foot badly smashed, and he took us fishing on the days that he was off, and the blood was oozing up through his sneaker eyelets and so on. I have so many memories of certainly the heyday of mining was over when I was growing up. There weren't the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in the pits of Pictou County. But I do remember the once in a long time, and they had been very frequent over the years, when a knock would come to a classroom door and someone would be told that his or her father had been killed in the pit. And I remember some cries from the hallways when I think back of that. And I just going back even more years, my grandmother's kid brother, 14 years old, killed in the pit. My great uncle was killed in the pit at the age of 14. And I could recite so many incidents that happened over the years. Certainly, my dad and my grandfathers could not probably remember or count the number of friends that they lost over that 100 years plus collectively that they spent in the pit. And it certainly one of the things that I have great pride on is that my father, when he was 30 years old in 1936, was a rescuer, a barefaced rescuer at Moose River, and received a citation from this House, was presented a medal by the Premier of the day, Angus L. MacDonald, and certainly the citation and the resolution from this House and the Medal for Conspicuous Service for Bravery are proud possessions that I have today, probably the proudest possessions that I have in this world today. And certainly the camaraderie was mentioned, the camaraderie that existed in the pit, but there was also tremendous competition between the towns of Spring Hill and my hometown of Westville, the competition in baseball that used to take place, the competition in track and field.
Order, please. The chatter is growing. The Honourable the member for Pictou East has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, even today in my hometown of Westville, all the teams are called the Miners. You know, the Westville Miners, all of the teams, hockey, baseball, Westville Miners. They became quite famous in a lot of respects for sure. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to again repeat the feeling that I have towards this bill and how important it is. I have attended Davis Day celebrations or remembrances, certainly celebrating the lives of those people, but remembrances for quite a few years. And looking back as well, when the mines were dying in Pictou County before Westray came along, I remember back in the 1970s as a very young municipal councillor being the chair of the Save the McBain Mine Committee and going down into the McBain mine on a number of occasions, trying to keep that mine open with the seams that were so small in that mine, and to see people still digging on their hands and knees in some of those seams was really something. And you know, we reflect back to the days of our youth, and I remember as a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old, 15 and 16. No TV, but no computer games. But our summer activity was opening bootleg coal mines, and you know, it's hard to believe that young people would set up a teepee like a tripod and dig down 8 or 10 feet into the earth and then start tunneling in. And it took 3 people to do this. You had to have someone on the surface with the buckets dumping them into the wheelbarrows and so on, and bracing the timbers and so on. I have so many reflections of times in my youth when the coal miner. All we heard was coal mining talk in our homes, and so we would try to emulate our fathers and go out and start a little bootleg coal mine. So, Mr. Speaker, the personal reflections that I have running through my mind at the moment, and I'd just like to go on record on how things have actually changed over the years. My father, after 33 years in the pit, was smashed up very badly trying to protect a couple of his buddies from a coal car that had slipped away and was going down the track. And he was smashed up very badly and ended up in hospital in Halifax and in New Glasgow for long periods of time. And in those days, worker compensation, workman's compensation, as it was called back in those days, ended up sending a check to him for $1,000 for 33 years of work in the pit, with a note saying that if the check were cashed, it would be deemed to be final payment. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I am humbled and proud to speak on this, and I think of the miners and how they related one with the other. I reflect on a friend saying to me one time, your dad really must have loved my uncle, because when he came to the house to see his remains, he cried, right? And I mean, the camaraderie that existed between these miners was really something. sometimes they would fight among themselves, but certainly they loved and respected each other and would do anything for each other. And I remember when people were lost in the pit, the collections that were taken were significant to help the families out. And that kind of spirit is something that I relate to, and I think back to how my dad and others loved Clary Gillis, the CCF Member of Parliament who fought for miners for years, and certainly J.B. McLaughlin who led the miners in Cape Breton for so many years, and so on. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to coal mining, I could go on for a long time, but this bill is something that is very important to me. It was handled magnificently by the minister, and I commend him for it, and I hope that this gets very quick passage, and that there will be continued reflection on June the 11th for those who served in the coal mines and kept things going, and certainly their contributions to the war effort and so on, as mentioned before, were so significant. So, Mr. Speaker, having certainly rambled somewhat, but having reflected on my own personal feelings, I want to see this move on as quickly as possible. And I want to say that there is almost a renewed interest in Davis Day. Since Westray, there is a renewed interest in Davis Day in Pictou County, and certainly there is a separate remembrance for Westray itself. And certainly looking at the 26 that were killed in Westray, I would be remiss if I did not point out that my wife's cousin was the youngest killed, 22 years old, Robert Stephen Doyle. And certainly on June the 11th, I will be remembering him and all the others that I can personally think of as I speak here today. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Minister of Justice.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I too am very pleased and also very proud to rise on the occasion of the second reading of this bill to mark William Davis as Miners' Memorial Day here in the province of Nova Scotia. And as we know, we all come from, and interestingly, about the composition of mining communities can be reflected in the composition of this House, as we have representatives from all three parties that sit in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, that understand they've come from, have been affected by, or involved with a mining community. And also speaks to the fact, Mr. Speaker, to the dynamic of our communities. And I know for myself, on the north side of Cape Breton, is a very proud tradition, and one that is echoed in my family's history and involvement with the coal mining industry. As you know, Mr. Speaker, literally, there are some of us that can say we grew up on the ash pile in the backyard, and let alone in my early days growing up right across the street from the Princess Coal Mine and an area in City Mines known as Bog Row. And people are very practical with their naming and nicknames, and people in the mines all had a very keen affection for one another. And at a time when, for working families, it was tough. And that speaks to the reality of William Davis and the incident that occurred from that time. And especially, Mr. Speaker, when a time when unions were very core and integral to the family and communities. But I also know of a resolve by the citizens and the workers in those coal mines that, as tough as life was, many of us would also know that those very people that were on fixed income, working very long hours in very difficult circumstances, also did what was called the checkoff, that they gave back to their community. They checked off and provided money from a very limited income to go back to their communities. And I know in our communities, Mr. Speaker, on the north side, churches have been built because of the mining community. Hospitals were built because of the mining community. Schools were built from within the mining community, and those individuals themselves were part of that construction of the very infrastructure of a community. And I do recognize the comments made by my honourable colleagues that reflected on the importance of Cape Breton and the coal mining, the importance of Nova Scotia and the coal mining communities from across this province that were a part of a tremendous effort when the world needed Canada, they needed Nova Scotia to fire the engines of a war and indeed of industry that supported that. And we were there, and Cape Bretoners, whether they served overseas or they served at home, everyone had their role to play. I know in my area you hear the stories of the mines and of the coal, the mines and the steel mill, and everyone that came together. And we see the culmination of that to this day in Sydney Harbour, where you have still the remnants of infrastructure from the war years, and indeed that were there to protect our harbour and protect the convoys that came back and forth. So as we celebrate democracy, we celebrate those who have served and continue to serve this great nation, we also have to be mindful of those that in their own way have stood up and taken up the cause for service without any regard for themselves or their safety, to provide for a safer community and provide for their families, Mr. Speaker. I also am aware that we've had more recent incidents when the tragedy of a mining disaster can affect us. I know the honourable members from Pictou County would know of that in a current day context. But we're also very hopeful, Mr. Speaker, as we go forward, for those of us that are looking with enthusiasm for the development of the Donkin Mine, Mr. Speaker, in your constituency, and the support you have from within that community and all of the region to see a major investment. But with that development and our keenness towards it, we always have to be ever mindful of the threats and the risks associated with coal mining. And subsurface coal mining is a very dangerous business, and that is why through the environmental, the safety processes, and now with occupational health and safety standards that never existed when my father or grandfather would have been in the mines, and their colleagues and friends and neighbours will be part. And thankfully for those future miners, they will benefit because of those that have come before them and have paid a dear price in doing that. But in that, we've always seen people that have served. I mean, we always know that the dragomen in Nova Scotia were infamous for their ability and skill and prowess when it came to doing that, and it became a competitive thing. We think of the men of the deep and the music tradition and keeping alive the culture of the area. That's very important, Mr. Speaker. But as we go forward, as I say, with enthusiasm about the development and the prospects for investment and job creation and its contribution to our energy mix, that the Donkin Mine offers. I know you're mindful, Mr. Speaker, also that we have to ever remember that safety and the security of the labour force is utmost, and that will be adhered to as we go forward in a much different way than it had been before. So I know, Mr. Speaker, as we reflect on the past, we have to look to the future, and as we go to the future, we must never forget William Davis, his legacy and the impact, and thus marking Miners' Memorial Day with his name. But also I'm very pleased that the Minister of Transportation and Infrastructure, Newell, brought forward Miners' Memorial Highway, and to always have in our highways for those that will travel through our lands, Mr. Speaker, that may not know the level of history that was shared here today, but will always then have a reminder that indeed we do remember and we're thankful for our heritage, and indeed we're a proud people because of that. And in fact, we are here in no short measure because of those roots that have allowed us to grow and sustain ourselves as Nova Scotians. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to add my voice and echo all the speakers today and all of those that have had a mining community heritage. I know we're very proud of our roots. And oftentimes, Mr. Speaker, it's said, you know, my father probably came from more of a Labour background than necessarily a Conservative background. But the point being is, Well, with time comes all things, and a Tory membership card for my father, too. But, Mr. Speaker, the point is, while we all come from different political ideologies, we all come from a common community, and that's called the great province of Nova Scotia, and what our coal mines have provided for us. That we should ever be mindful of and thankful for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable, the member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too am pleased to have a couple of minutes to rise and speak on this bill number 189, the William Davis Miners Memorial Day Act, and I certainly commend the minister for bringing this forward, and I've had the opportunity on a number of occasions to attend June 11th services, I guess Davis Day as we called it, in various parts of the province.
Order, please. The noise level is just crawling up a little bit. The Honourable, the member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, I've had the opportunity to attend what we have always called Davis Day ceremonies in Stellarton on a number of occasions. I had the opportunity once or twice to go to Spring Hill and attend their June 11th ceremonies there, and it's always been a privilege. I guess coming from a county where coal mining is such an important part of our past, and still there's people employed there in the coal mining industry, even though it's mostly above ground now at this point, but it's there's still a number of people employed in the strip mine activity in Stellarton, but getting the remnants of the coal that still remains in that huge pit, the Ford seam there in Pictou County. But really, the history of coal mining in this province has been a part of the fabric of our communities, part of the history of our life here in this province, and it has been for more than 200 years. And and unfortunately, through all that time, there's been hundreds, men and boys that have been lost their lives in their struggle in Pictou County, hundreds more in Cape Breton and in Cumberland County. So it's thousands of people overall that have given the supreme sacrifice to to work and to make a living for their families and in the mining industry in our province. I had the privilege, Mr. Speaker, of attending the 50th anniversary services on October the 23rd, which was held in Spring Hill, and to remember that tragedy there of the bump of 58 and in the minister's riding, and I was there that night with the member from Cole Harbour, a leader of the opposition, and one gentleman that I had the privilege of meeting that night was Dr. Arnold Burden, who was the doctor, was on site and went underground and tried to, or participated in the rescue of a number of the miners there at that time. And a very interesting gentleman. I think he's about 86 years old now, and he was telling us some stories about that particular time in 1958 when he and others went under the ground and had to dig through very narrow little passages, through narrow tunnels to try to rescue their fellow brothers that were trapped there underground for a number of days. So it's people and stories like that that we remember and we know that are very important to the communities, that there in that area, and then certainly in Pictou County. I remember all too well May the 9th, 1992. I was working up early that morning. I think about 6 o'clock or 6:15. I heard on the radio that there was something happening at the mine, but on the radio they didn't know just what it was. And by 6:30, 6:45, they had news of the tragedy that occurred there, and it was, I guess it's something you never forget. It's like people know or they can remember far enough back. Where were you when President Kennedy was shot? Well, what were you doing when the May 9th, the West Raid tragedy occurred? So you never forget just where you were and when you first heard that news. It's just one of those lifetime events that stays with you. In that mine disaster in May of '92, I lost a good friend, a neighbor of mine. His name was Mike McKay. He lived just a mile down the road from us, and At the time, he was 38 years old, and one of the 26 miners that lost their life that night or that early morning. So, you know, our province is filled with that history of tragedy and through the 1800s and the 1900s, and let's hope it doesn't occur, you know, any longer in this century. There are lessons to be learned, certainly. From the Westray disaster, there was a full report commissioned. Judge Richard had a number of recommendations that come forward. And as the member previous to me was speaking from Cape Breton North, you know, I hope that some of those lessons will be carried forward and you know, will benefit from that to protect lives in the Donkin mine as that one gets ready to open. But, you know, so it's important that we remember, you know, what's our past, but, and as we move forward, that, you know, we recognize that the history of coal mining, it's a history of grit, it's a history of determination, it's a history of camaraderie amongst the workers, and certainly a history of sacrifice. So I commend the minister again for bringing this bill forward. I'm pleased to know that it's now officially going to be the William Davis Miners Memorial Day. And it's just an honor that we're remembering him and remembering all miners that have gave the sacrifice over time. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to support this bill, and I look forward to going on to a law amendment stage. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very pleased to stand in my place to also add my support for the bill.